All right, Mike Murray here with Judge Stephen Bailey, candidate for California Attorney General. Thank you so much for coming on the show today. It's a real honor to have you on.
Thank you for having me.
So, I've looked over your impressive resume, and I see that you were a judge in nearby South Lake Tahoe. How has
I
serving
was.
as how has serving as a Superior Court judge in South Lake Tahoe prepared you to take over the office of Attorney General?
But, it's kind of a unique opportunity that most judges don't have. And that is specifically, you're sitting there on the border, so you deal with authorities out of the state of Nevada on a regular basis. You regularly do extraditions across the border. Most judges, if they see an extradition in a month, they're lucky I could see a number of the extraditions every single week, both ways, going to Nevada, coming into California. More importantly, as a judge in South Lake Tahoe, I was the civil judge who did, at the lake, had opportunities to do a varied assignment on criminal, everything from drugs and mental health all the way up through homicides. You don't get that in most benches. Most judges will go a whole career and never have the opportunities that I had. I was presiding juvenile judge for a little over 4 years for the county of El Dorado, and as such, dealt with, working on programs that would enhance services to juveniles, and I did probate, so I was, actively involved in wills, trusts, and issues that affected conservatorships of adults and juveniles. And more importantly, there probably is no assignment on the bench that I didn't do.
So, I've noticed that out of both the candidates, you're the only candidate with expertise in criminal law and criminal justice, like you were just talking about. Do you think that should be a
Yeah.
prerequisite for being an attorney general?
I don't think it's a prerequisite necessarily, but I'll tell you, one of the major functions of the Attorney General is to be the California's chief law enforcement officer. It doesn't hurt a bit to have spent over 20 years working in the area of criminal law, both as an attorney and then as a judge. Certainly, you want to have someone who's well versed on constitutional and
I lost you there for a
criminal
second.
justice.
I'm sorry, I lost you there for a second.
And what I was saying is, having that skill and expertise in criminal justice becomes a real asset and something that an attorney general ought to have when he evaluates the direction the state needs to take, how we protect the public safety.
So, aside from serving as a judge, serving on the bench, can you let the listeners know a little bit about you and your background?
Certainly, spent nearly 25 years as a judge and or attorney in this state. Prior to that, I was a director level appointee of Governor George Majan in the Department of Social Services. In that role, I worked on foster care issues. I worked on issues of housing for homeless people that had severe disabilities, and helped write licensing rules and regulations. I spent 7.5 years as the department's chief legislative officer, and such. I worked with Republicans and Democrats in the legislature. I think that'll come in very handy as the attorney general when I have to work with Democrats in the legislature, many of whom are going to disagree with the policies that I want to pursue.
Well, that will be nice to have somebody that's actually cooperative with the other side, as well as being able to stand their ground. So, can we talk about your opponent for a second?
Sure.
So, Xavier Becerra, he's the current Attorney General. He did not practice law in California for 26 years when Governor Brown appointed him to Attorney General. Is
That's correct. And his law license was inactive for that whole time, which means that he wasn't required to keep up on California law or California issues. He spent his time back in Washington, D.C. as a congressman, and, that there's a role for that, maybe to be Speaker of the House someday, but to come out here.
Oh, I think I lost you again. Judge, are you there? All right, Judge Bailey, I think we got you back on. Are you there?
I'm here.
All right. We were talking about Becerra not practicing for about 26 years as an attorney in California. Were you saying there's some sort of requirement, or there should be a requirement on that?
No, I don't think there's a requirement that you need to have practiced in the area of criminal law. I think it may not be a requirement, but if you were doing a job interview for a person that would be qualified to be the Attorney General, if you're going to have the chief law enforcement officer, be the Attorney General, and that's what we have in this state, it would seem that having experience in criminal law might be very helpful. And in this case, we've had an Attorney General who didn't practice law in the state of California, was 26 years inactive. He's not the person that you would hire to do this kind of job. That's what makes me unique in this race for Attorney General. I was unique in the primary because no other candidate running, including the incumbent, had any experience in criminal law. And I'm absolutely unique here in the general election, being the only person in the race who understands California's criminal justice system, California's criminal codes, and has the ability to speak with authority about those and why we need to maintain safe streets, safe neighborhoods, and it gives me a unique perspective in being able to keep our friends, neighbors, kids, and grandkids safe in California.
See, I think a lot of the people that have watched the Office of Attorney General lately don't really understand what the Attorney General does. I mean, it's the chief law enforcement officer and oversees Department of Justice. It's been a political position, it seems like, for the last, since Becerra took over, and even beyond that. So I'm really happy to hear about you and somebody that actually wants to use the experience they have in the criminal justice field to fix the problem. With that, sanctuary state's obviously a very hot topic. We're in the middle of a sanctuary state fight here in Placer County, trying to fight against SB 54 at the Board of Supervisors level. Do you support or oppose the sanctuary state legislation passed by the legislature?
I'm absolutely in opposition to it. It's sanctuary to no one but criminals. Doesn't protect our streets, doesn't protect our neighborhoods, puts our first responders at risk on a daily basis because it's letting hardened violent criminals back out on our streets, people that should have been deported, but now we're having to chase down in the neighborhoods. It is a ridiculous law, and it runs counter to what Californians have come to expect, and that is to have safe streets and safe neighborhoods. And having looked at this law and realized that it's turning criminals loose, I'm simply appalled. However, I am pleasantly surprised and heartened by the fact that local leaders in our communities are rising up all over California to say enough is enough. We oppose this. I applaud Placer County for taking the issue up, and quite frankly, I hope that they have the courage as political leaders to send a message to Sacramento that they are not going to be party to releasing dangerous criminals back onto our streets.
Do you find it constitutional? Do you find SB 54 constitutional?
No. I believe that it is patently unconstitutional, and I think that's going to be borne out when the U.S. Supreme Court gets the case that's currently in the federal court in Sacramento. Today the state had a motion. Federal judge finally ruled that the case would go forward. It's now a case that's at issue. The state's going to be forced to answer on the merits of the case as opposed to trying to dismiss it outright. Federal judge said that the case can proceed, and I think we owe a debt of gratitude to our U.S. Attorney General for standing up, being counted, and taking on the state of California, which has become a lawless bastion in this great country.
So you mentioned the U.S. Attorney General. What can Attorney General Bailey do to stop the law and have it overturned?
Well, I think as an officer of the court, I as Attorney General have a obligation to go into court and tell the judge that I believe that sanctuary state is unconstitutional. And I think it's unconstitutional based on the supremacy clause of the United States Constitution. Having been a judge for 8.5 years, I've seen cases come in front of me that beg for a judicial ruling on constitutionality. And as Attorney General, I'm going to ask the federal judge to declare the law unconstitutional because, quite frankly, it is unconstitutional.
I can't agree with you more. I think the biggest complaint with it is everybody's biggest fear is public safety. That should be number one for the government officials. I know it's up there for the people of this state and the country in general. How is California doing on public safety, would you say?
Well, every single year since Jerry Brown took over as governor and Kamala Harris and now this appointed guy, Javier Becerra, every year crime has been going up in many locations in the state at double digits. It's reached the point where Californians are horrified by what's happening in their state. They want things to change. What was very interesting in some of the recent surveys, not only is California 50th in quality of life, but many Democrats and independents, in fact, 39% of the Democrats in the state say the state's going in the wrong direction. Public safety has a lot to do with that. Republicans, Democrats, and independents don't feel safe in this state, and it appears to them that the only people that are being protected in California are the criminals, and they want our state to go in a different direction. And I'm going to take the state in a different direction when I'm elected Attorney General come November.
I'm honestly excited about that. So Prop 47. How have laws like Prop 47 affected public safety? Has it just knocked us over the cliff, or what?
It has really pushed us to the edge of the cliff, if not over. I think when politicians lie to the voting public, and Prop 47 is maybe the poster child of lying to the voting public. When the Democrats said we were going to get safe streets and schools, and they were going to dump this big pile of savings on the local counties so that they could provide programs. And what ended up happening, the law had nothing to do with public safety. It had nothing to do with making streets and schools safer. What it did do was decriminalize property crimes and decriminalize drug crimes, and created a situation, maybe the perfect storm, where dopers and drug addicts and drug traffickers now had free reign to steal whatever they felt like stealing. And as long as they kept the theft under $950 each time, they would get a misdemeanor. A misdemeanor essentially means no real jail time, and it's simply to a crook the cost of doing business. And with Prop 47, property crimes have spiked throughout the state. Those are the precursor crimes to more serious and more violent felonies. It's the very thing that Californians didn't buy into. They didn't understand it with Prop 47 that they were being lied to. They thought at that point that politicians at least could be trusted, that the ballot could be trusted. But utilizing the Attorney General at the time, Kamala Harris, they wrote a misleading, dishonest ballot title and summary, which, by the way, is the sole responsibility of the Attorney General. The one thing the Attorney General ought to be doing for citizens of California is being trustworthy and truthful when he tells them something. But in Prop 47, they lied to us. Mm-hmm. And what we ended up with is an increase in crime and none of the benefits that we were told we should expect. Not safer streets, not safer schools, and in fact, we ended up with all of our property being susceptible to these criminals and crooks.
I still remember when Prop 47 was on the ballot and people voted for it. I remember the day after explaining to people what they actually voted for, and they were completely confused because the ballot was written up in such a way as to confuse people.
It was. But beyond confusion, it was simply dishonest. Mm-hmm. When they said that they were going to send the savings that they were going to realize off of Prop 47, and according to the legislative analysts, they have received some savings, some going on to $100 million in savings. And for the first 4 years of Prop 47's existence, just a drop of that money came back to the local jurisdictions. Placer County gets almost nothing off of it, and yet its property crimes have gone up over that same period of time, and quite frankly, law enforcement, there's little taste in law enforcement's mouth to go out and enforce the law when there's really no consequence from arresting somebody who's burglarized your property, your garage, broken into your house. If it's a misdemeanor, it's a misdemeanor, and there's little that can be done to those type of criminals.
It really is a shame. Is there any bills or anything that are making their way through right now that we should be on the lookout for? And if there is, as Attorney General, what pressure can you put on legislation to stop these? To protect us people?
Yeah, there's a critical piece of legislation going through right now that would change the use of force standard for law enforcement from reasonable to necessary. Reasonableness for use of deadly force has been in California's statute since 1872. Mm-hmm. It's well litigated. It's well understood. It's something that law enforcement officers can be trained to and can understand where the dividing line between unlawful use of force and lawful use of force is. But the legislature is rushing through a bill right now to change the standard to necessary. And what it's going to cause law enforcement to do is to second guess themselves. Now every case is going to be something that ought to go to into a lawsuit and or prosecution when the use of force results in someone's death. But worse yet, it's going to create a checklist for officers so that they're going through trying to think of whether in that split second they've gone through all the potential checklist areas so that before they can use deadly force.
It makes me sick. That absolutely makes me sick that the police officers are, putting their lives at risk.
You could be that victim that's standing there next to the officer, and you're the one that gets killed while the officer's trying to figure out whether he's used gone through the entire checklist. I don't want to put my life on the line that way for those people down in Sacramento. But worse yet, the first responder is now in danger because he may be the second life lost because he can't get through the checklist fast enough. It's a ridiculous change in the law. It's going to put victims at risk. It's going to put law enforcement at risk, and I'm not willing to have my name on it. Now, you ask me, what would I do as as Attorney General.
Yeah, how do you stop that?
I'll go over to the legislature. I'll start talking to those legislators. We will use the bully pulpit of the Attorney General's office and the pressure that we can bring as the Attorney General, the Chief Law Officer, and the Chief Law Enforcement Officer to get out to the voters and the people of California to let the people actually know what's happening in Sacramento. I'll travel around the state. I'll go to the districts of those legislators that are foolish enough to put our citizens at risk and our law enforcement professionals at risk, and we will put the pressure on them directly. You know, down in Orange County, they just sent a Democrat senator packing because he didn't listen to the people. He was sent a clear message that he wasn't going to raise taxes, and he gets up to Sacramento and thinks that because he's 400 miles away, nobody's going to know. We're going to make, when I'm Attorney General, I'm going to make every single one of those Democrats that are putting us at risk accountable to their constituents. We'll go down and talk in their district. We will campaign in their district, and we will oust them as legislators if they're not going to be responsive to the people of their district.
I'm truly excited about that. Going back to the police officers taking care of them, I see you are endorsed by Sacramento County Sheriff and the California Peace Officers Association. Congratulations on that. What does it mean to you to have the support of those law enforcement agents that you're trying to help? I mean, are they essentially saying you're doing it right? You have it right? I mean,
I have, you know, that's only the tip of the iceberg in terms of the support we have. Mm-hmm. You know, we have the Los Angeles Police Protective League, the largest law enforcement union in the state of California, the Los Angeles Police First Responders. We've got the Los Angeles Deputy Sheriff's Association supporting me. I've got sheriffs, and every single day we get more. And, you know, I'm proud to have the endorsements of all these groups. You know, those are the ones putting their life on the line for you and I every single day. And to have their support is not only gratifying, but sends a message to Sacramento that the first responders in this state aren't going to take this line down, and that they're going to stand up and they're going to support a right-of-center conservative candidate running for Attorney General. And that kind of support, it means a lot to have it. You know, the Los Angeles Police Protective League endorsed me just before the primary, and if you look around at the vote totals, you know, we came in a resounding second. It wasn't even close between second and third, and the guy I beat had run statewide and been elected twice statewide. So a message is being sent to the progressives in California that times are changing and that the voters of California are going to change the type of leadership that they have at the top in California, and they'll elect me Attorney General of California in November.
Well, sometimes it takes a little bit of pain to understand that need. So I have a kind of a short story. So last summer I'm at Politicon down in Southern California, and I caught a little bit of Becerra speaking. And he was talking about Russia, and he was talking about Donald Trump needing to be impeached because of Russia. And I couldn't believe what I was hearing. A sitting attorney general really just politicizing the office and calling for impeachment without evidence of wrongdoing. I mean, since then he's called Trump names like bigot and unstable. He even told him to be careful about running into Maxine Waters in a dark alley. Just really childish behavior. But he's taken that feud even further, and he's taken it to the courts. Last I saw, it was like over 35 times he sued President Trump and the federal government and the administration, including topics like healthcare, immigration, net neutrality, loan forgiveness. Should the AG's office be used as a political weapon, with the primary responsibility being suing the president every chance they get?
You know, obviously no. And the Attorney General's office, of all the offices in the state of California, is the one office that citizens here in the state think ought to be run in a nonpartisan, objective manner. it shouldn't be politicized. Law and order, public safety isn't a Republican or a Democrat issue. When law enforcement shows up at your door to take a report of a crime that's been committed against you, they don't ask you whether you're a Republican or a Democrat. They just simply take the report and go out and solve the crime. And my opinion of how the Attorney General's office ought to be run is that it ought to be run as a nonpartisan office. It doesn't necessarily have to be constitutionally nonpartisan, but the office holder ought to treat it as if it was the law office for the people of California, and that includes all the people, regardless of your race, color, creed, national origin, sexual orientation. You ought to have confidence that the Attorney General of California is going to go out and protect your interests and protect your needs. Unfortunately, because this Attorney General spent so many years in Washington, he's lost the perspective as to California problems. Quite frankly, he doesn't know what California problems are because he spent most of his time in Washington and at his home in Maryland. And, pretty soon you get down to a situation where you can't expect him to do much different than he's doing because he doesn't really have any affinity to the problems that you and I have to face every single day, trying to get up, get to work, make a living here in this state. So it hardly surprises me that he would react to every tweet coming out of Washington, D.C. But the fact of the matter is, California has unique problems and needs an Attorney General that's going to be focused on those unique problems and is willing to solve the unique problems that California citizens have. And this Attorney General hasn't shown any inclination to address California problems and California needs.
It almost feels like he's a politician pretending to be an Attorney General. That's how it feels for a lot of the citizens of this state. I mean, last week the Supreme Court laid some serious blows on him with the 3 court cases. And he's tweeting out that the Supreme Court of the United States is wrong. And those, his words, not mine. What? Is that acceptable as an Attorney General to really go after the United States Supreme Court because you didn't get your way? Is that what different type of approach would you take with the office than what he's doing?
I would take the approach of respect to the court. And if you don't have respect when you're announcing, he's supposedly, and some days you wonder, a lawyer, an officer of the court. Decorum would say that you would respect the decision of the court even if you disagree with it. And when the U.S. Supreme Court is heard, that is the decision, that's the final decision in this country. To have him saying that the court, because he disagrees, is wrong, is one, ridiculous, and doesn't make it any less the law of the land. But unfortunately, if you haven't practiced law and you haven't been in front of a judge for 26 years, you probably don't know that, and you're kind of doing your internship at the price of the people's paycheck and the people's taxes. And that's exactly what we've got with this Attorney General. Frankly, it's an embarrassment.
I absolutely agree. And to tell you the truth, I am very excited about you possibly taking over the role of Attorney General. Can you tell our listeners where to find more information about you, where to sign up to volunteer, where to help your campaign?
Well, the easiest place to go is www.baileyforag.com. That's BAILEYFORAG.com. You can follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. So, and I don't remember the handles on those, but it's easy enough. Just go on, look for Bailey for Attorney General or Stephen Bailey for Attorney General, and you'll pop it right up on Facebook. We'd love to have you follow us, follow our pages, and you can volunteer or donate right on our webpage.
Well, I'll make sure to get some links up on our social media sites as well to connect. Thank you again for coming on the show. I know how busy you are, and I really do appreciate you coming on.
Not a problem. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. We're going to have to go to commercial break right now, but please stay tuned.